What's up guys, Taiki here, and today I wanted to discuss the CRV exploit and the implications for the broader markets and what I think happens to everything. So let's get right into it. Nice financial advice. So there was a CRV exploit a couple of days ago where roughly $27 million were exploited in Ether for these protocols. And this was something called a re-entrancy attack. And you feel free to look this up in your own time. It's going to get too long if I talk about this, but this is a pretty common attack vector for smart contracts. And unfortunately, this wasn't really a bug in the CRV smart contract. It was a bug on Viper, which is another smart contract programming language. Most DeFi applications use Solidity, and it seems like Solidity contracts is fine. It's mostly contained within like the Viper, and I think most, like very few protocols use the Viper. But I guess it's like a reality check that there could be bad code, and even if the founder, and the team does everything correct, and there's like external factors that teams have to be aware of, and also the CRV ETH pool on chain was also drained, roughly 32 million CRV. So CRV is very illiquid on chain, which causes a lot of problems when it comes to potential liquidations. So let's talk about that. If you've been keeping track of DeFi, you probably know about Michael Egorov, the CRV founder, his on-chain position. He has $190 million worth of value, but this isn't really real value, right? That could be realized because most of his position is using CRV as collateral and then borrowing stablecoins against it. In this case, he has $150 million worth of CRV, borrowing $54 million of USDT. Is this much? Is it actual $150 million worth of value, right? Definitely not. If he had to liquidate his position today, he maybe gets 10, 20, $30 million worth of value, right? I mean, maybe that could be argued, right? But it's a very illiquid position. Abracadabra, there's roughly $26 million here, with $12 million worth of stablecoins borrowed. Fraxlend is a position here, right? $22 million, and then you kind of get the idea. So the way he's financed his mansions and whatnot, and this is the part that gets people angry. It's oh my god, he just took his illiquid altcoin, borrowed against it, and bought mansions, and now that his price is going down, he's gonna get liquidated, which is understandable, right? But I'll try to reserve my thoughts on here on this topic right now, and I'll try to talk more about the risks to the rest of the markets. So why wasn't this addressed? Why did AAVE and all these money markets allow this to happen? This has been a pretty hot topic for quite some time now, and then in June 18th, there was actually this proposal from a risk management company called Gauntlet. Said, okay, no, this is dangerous. Let's try to freeze CRV and not allow any more borrows against it. And this was actually denied by governance. And this character called Decent Muse, he was okay, what the hell is this, right? This doesn't. I guess this is a way for the CRV founder to sell indirectly, and not anger the community, right? Because whenever a founder sells their tokens, people get angry, right? It's oh my god, you're dumping on us, and maybe it's also tax optimized, but does he really have intentions to actually pay back his debt? Because of course, if the CRV price doesn't go down, this is perfect, right? No one's angry, but as soon as it goes down due to an exploit, then it kind of poses threats to the price of CRV and also these money markets. And then Mark Zeller, who's part of the AAVE Chan initiative, talked about, okay, I'm not going to redo this, but basically, the governance proposal did not pass. Maybe this highlights a flaw in governance proposals where maybe AAVE and CRV communities are too friendly, and they didn't really take this seriously. And I do think that they were going to resolve this somehow, but unfortunately, the exploit happened, and now we have to deal with it now. What does it actually mean, right? And I think this became a big issue because of this protocol designed by Fraxlend. Because if you think about how AAVE v2 works, anyone can use any collateral and borrow against it, right? It's cross-collateralized. So, Michael, right? He's using CRV's collateral, but he pays the same borrow interest rates for Tether as you and I, right? Which doesn't make any sense, because if he's borrowing in CRV, then technically his position is higher risk, so the bank should the bank should charge a higher interest rate. But that's not really how it works, and this kind of highlights a flaw here, and Fraxlend kind of improves on that. So let's talk about Fraxlend, and this kind of kickstarted the whole fear in the markets, and there's nothing wrong with Fraxlend. In fact, they have a very sound protocol design, and they have these isolated money markets, right? So if you're lending on Fraxlend, right, which is the money market for ETH ETH pool, even if there's like bad debt in the CRV pool, like your position is not going to be at risk. Whereas for Aave, if you're lending USDT and Michael can't repay his loan, then there's a chance that you won't be able to pull out your stablecoin. And for the CRV market, for Fraxlend, the half-life is 12 hours, meaning that if the utilization rate is 100%, that the borrow rate is going to double every 12 hours. So the utilization rate basically means that, every frax that's lent into the protocol is being borrowed by the borrower. And if that's going to be the case for 12 hours, then the borrow rate is going to double, which of course was happening a few days ago, because like who the hell wants to lend out, frax to like this particular lender, right? Because he sounds like he's going to default. And if you do the math here, after 4 days, the interest rate was going to be like 10,000%. So like no matter the price of CRV, even if it's like flat, this position was going to get liquidated. So this kind of forced Michael's hand, and he had to liquidate his position. And there was fear in the markets, because if he wasn't able to refinance his loan, I suppose, then there was going to be some liquidation, cascading liquidations, right? It was a ticking time bomb, because if he didn't repay in a few days, it was going to be liquidated, right? And like what's going to happen when there's like $2 million worth of CRV liquidity on chain, and there needs to be like this much CRV like sold into the markets, right? It just like doesn't happen. So in that scenario, right, in the worst case scenario, like Aave holders and USDT lenders on Aave are going to be left holding this bag, because the liquidator can't liquidate this position. Fortunately, Michael was able to kick the can down the road. He sold some Curve OTC to these players, 40 cents, right? OTC handshake agreement, 3 to 6 month lockup. If the CRV price rises to 80 cents, then they can sell. So it's a handshake agreement. Like there's like no smart contract enforcing this lockup. They're just saying, okay, like please buy my token, and like don't sell, basically, right? And also, right, like these backers also don't really give us a vote of confidence, because ideally, right, maybe he's able to like raise money from other founders, like Stani from Aave, came from Synthetics or something, or like VCs, but like he's like lending, he's like borrowing, or he sold like money, CRV to like Machi Big Brother, right? And like Cream Finance, right? It's like these really aren't like the figures that you want aligned for like your long, like if you're like a CRV holder. So it kind of shows that he was kind of desperate. And like every single day there's like new like OTC deals being announced. But if you think about it, right, it's like very PvP, and it's like very manipulative, because if you're like, for example, a Machi Big Brother, or you have some inside information that there's going to be some OTC deal happening, and that the entire market is shorting CRV, you can literally, right, like participate in the round and just like super long, like leverage long CRV on perps on like a centralized exchange, and then like profit when like those shorts get squeezed. So and then like after that happens, like maybe these people can like short CRV after the pump, and then like hedge this like 3 to 6 month lockup. So like these holders, like they're like looking to profit, right? And they're not necessarily like super aligned. I mean, like I'm not like generalizing all of them, but like on average, right? And like whenever more OTC deals get announced, I would expect that like that's happening right behind the scenes. And then I guess like with the OTC deal, the Fraxlend situation was resolved, right? So as long as CRV doesn't really like nuke like 30 cents or something, right, his Aave position is not going to get liquidated. However, right, like these money markets, they're not going to stand around and do nothing. Abracadabra just introduced this governance proposal that's live right now to change like the interest rate adjustments for like the CRV market. So TLDR, right, it pushes the base interest rates to borrow MIM, the stablecoin, to 200%. And as the price of CRV falls, it kind of like just like supercharges like the interest rate. So it's like similar to like the Fraxlend situation. Like even if the CRV price doesn't go down that much, the position can get liquidated, and it kind of accelerates the timeline for like Michael to like just raise up capital elsewhere. Which is kind of dangerous. I mean, there's like moral issues around this, right? It's like, oh, like Fraxlend was designed like this beforehand, and now like Abracadabra is gonna like do this via governance. But I mean, I totally understand like where the money markets like their perspective, right? It's like why would like if I'm like the founder, or if I'm like the lead dev for Abracadabra, like why would I just like let this thing like just like blow up, right? Like I'm gonna be the first one to like raise interest rates to force Michael to pay off that loan, right? So that there's like no bad debt. And this is kind of equivalent to like on-chain loan sharks, right? Like if you like borrow money from the mafia and you don't repay, like they come to your house and they like beat you up, right? It's kind of like the equivalent, right? Except it's via smart contracts and like boosting like interest rates. And it's like a very PvP. Like there could be like some cooperation happening here, right? Like if all the lending protocols agree to not like do this, then it gives Michael time, and maybe he can liquidate his mansion, maybe he can like he can sell his angel investing tokens and like equity OTC or something, like slowly like drum up liquidity. But like what Michael needs is time, right? If he has time, he can probably like save this cascading liquidation from happening. But if all these money markets try to like turbo boost like the interest rates, then like the entire system is at risk, and someone is going to be left holding the bag, right? So yeah, on-chain loan sharks, I mean, it makes sense, right? I don't think we should be blaming Abracadabra by any means. So I guess like let's talk about the bad debt, right? So like negative externalities for the rest of DeFi. So this is the AAVE position, right? He has this much CRV, he borrowed $54 million. But of course, right, like if the market try to sell this, then like how much actual dollars can be salvaged? I'm not quite sure. And look, this is not going to happen, right? This is very, very unlikely, but let's do like a simple thought experiment, so you kind of understand like the depth and like the risks to the AAVE protocol. So if CRV can be efficiently sold for $30 million, which is like an 80% haircut, which I think is kind of reasonable. Like I'm not even sure, like, yeah, I mean, you can like argue like with this number, right? But it doesn't really matter, right? The point is, if the system can only liquidate $30 million worth of this, then it leaves the system with $24 million worth of bad debt, right? Because you can't liquidate his position. So like, how is this bad debt going to be resolved? Well, it's going to be resolved with the AAVE stability module, right? The safety module. And how it works is if you stake your AAVE, like on AAVE, then you earn some yield, but you're also accepting the risk that whenever there's like bad debt, your locked AAVE is going to be auctioned on the market to be sold. So that's kind of how AAVE deals with bad debt. And if you want to unstake your AAVE, you have to wait a period of 7 days. So like we've been seeing like a bunch of like people like try to unstake AAVE because they're scared, because like staked AAVE is like can't be sold, right? You have to wait 1 week. Like for example, there's like $200 million worth of staked AAVE, but if the market knows that some AAVE can potentially be sold, like maybe the market like front runs this like by selling, which I think is not the most likely outcome, but it's a possibility, right? I'm like just letting you know like what could happen in the worst case scenario. AAVE does have a treasury of $37 million, but this is also where they pay employees from, right? So ideally they don't tap into this. So even if there's like bad debt in the ecosystem, like it's gonna come out of here. So like it's not gonna like destroy the markets like ultimately. But either way, I think there's like major headwinds for the token here. So in terms of summary, and in terms of like what I think is gonna happen, I think Michael is too rich, too connected, and sure, he might not seem like he has the money right now, but if he can buy enough time, he's gonna figure out a way to slowly sell his position over time. I do expect a very slow bleed in the price of CRV, and AAVE, right, the token is going to have some headwinds because until this problem is resolved, it's going to be really hard for buyers to step in, right? Because like, what if there's bad debt, right? Of course, like it's not going to go, like neither token is going to go to zero. There's always value here. But like headwinds for these prices, because like Michael's position has to be unwound over time. So that's like half of the CRV supply that has to be sold. So like, why would anyone like hold CRV longer term? It's not going to go to zero because you can buy CRV, lock it up, and earn like the transaction fees. But also, if the CRV price is going down, then there's less incentive to LP on Curve, and then you kind of have to think about the implications there. I can easily see AAVE striking up some deal with Curve and Michael to protect the entire position so that there isn't some cascading liquidation. Because if there is a cascading liquidation, then like AAVE holders and AAVE lenders are going to be left holding the bag. So if you're lending USDT on AAVE mainnet, I would be careful, right? Just be aware of the risks, because if there is a cascading liquidation, there's a chance that you won't be able to pull out your USDT. We kind of saw this with Venus protocol when there was like the bridge hack with Binance Smart Chain. The BNB, I mean, basically the Binance team basically like took over that position just so that like liquidations won't happen. And they agreed that they're going to liquidate this position over time, right? So I can see a similar event happening, right? So like maybe AAVE team is like, okay, like Michael, like we're going to like not allow liquidations here, but you have to promise us that you're going to pay like 20% interest rates for your USDT. Please liquidate your house, right? Please sell your mansion in Australia. Please sell all your angel investments equity for dollars, and like pay back our loan. And then like there's like the moral argument of like, or like this another argument of like, is Michael willing to do that, right? Is Michael willing to like liquidate his house, mansion, like miss out on upside for his other angel investments to, like get rid of this? I'm not quite sure, right? And there's also the argument where like, if Michael can like hold on to all his like equity deals for like 3 years, then like at some point they're going to be worth billions, and then he can pay. And so, like the point is like, Michael needs time, right? If he can buy enough time, like the entire situation is going to be fine. But I guess there's uncertainty around the time component. So there's like a bunch of fear around there. And also, right, if Abracadabra, for example, and like Fraxlend and like other money markets agree to like not like boost up interest rates, then that's also like a way for Michael to like slowly, buy time. However, if one of them defects, right, as in Abracadabra, they're saying, screw you, like we're gonna boost interest rates, then that also puts pressure on the entire system. Like for example, like if everyone like doesn't do anything, then it buys Michael time, maybe like no bad debt happens. But if Abracadabra forces Michael to like pay back like $12 million or whatever, then Michael has to sell Curve at lower prices as a form of like forced partial liquidations, OTC, like OTC markets. Then that could also lead to lower prices, and then like AAVE has to do something, right? So hopefully like this doesn't happen, but there's like risk there. So implications for the rest of DeFi, right? Is this going to nuke our bags? Is this going to destroy DeFi? I don't really think so, because I think most of the risk is contained within CRV and AAVE, right? Like as in like the holders, right? CRV holders are going to suffer because like who's going to buy this thing, and like what's going to be the fair value? Like maybe it's like very, very like much lower, and then like maybe AAVE holders and AAVE lenders might be left holding the bag in the short to medium term, but I think the treasury can cover it, so I think it's going to be fine. But if you're like an AAVE holder, right, the token, then it's not going to be good for, I guess, like the image, right, like the brand value and whatnot. Because no matter what happens, right, like whether this happens in the next 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, Michael's going to have to sell his like CRV, like either through willing, like by himself, or like just like, or like forced, and some bad debt is likely to form somewhere. And I think it's going to be on AAVE, but I think AAVE can, use the treasury and the safety module, sell tokens and like figure it out, because, like worst case scenario, like maybe AAVE has to sell a bunch of tokens to like VCs at like a significant discount to raise up cash. I think a VC is willing to step up, and like other buyers are willing to step up to like let that happen. And there's not going to be like a down like a spiral of like entire like systems like being destroyed, in my opinion. I think both tokens are going to bleed. I mean, it doesn't mean that things can't pump via short squeezes and like narrative, but I think there's major headwinds for both tokens. Shorting is like dangerous because, like I mentioned, there's like PvP games to be played where like some player can like OTC CRB, and then before announcing it, they can like just like lever long CRB and then like liquidate shorts that way. So like there's like that risk. But I think CRB is gonna experience like a slow bleed. I think AAVE can recover, but it's gonna take some time. And I think most likely outcome is like Michael is gonna just slowly find ways to liquidate his positions of CRV or other assets, and we don't really have to deal with like huge amounts of bad debt, right? I think the worst case scenario can be avoided. CRV price down is also going to be bad for like projects that rely on the price of CRV. Like for example, like Yearn, right? They're like an auto compounder. They kind of rely on CRV price being pretty high because like that's one source of the yield. Same goes for Fraxseed, because the growth of staked Fraxseed kind of relies on like LP rewards being high. It's not going to destroy these protocols, but it kind of puts like a cap on like how much they can grow. And then other money markets, they're probably going to be reluctant to list altcoins. Maybe more projects are going to go like the Fraxlend route, and like maybe like the next generation of money markets are going to be isolated pools with variable interest rates instead of like cross collateralization. I think cross collateralization is like totally fine, but it's going to be limited to like majors such as Bitcoin, Ether, and other stablecoins. Curve is part of grassroots DeFi. I obviously want it to succeed, but even if it goes to zero, like it's not gonna like destroy DeFi, right? Liquidity is gonna just go elsewhere, and price nuking might destroy sentiment, and people will call for the death of DeFi. But I don't really see it as like a huge risk to the markets. Let's say like 2 months from now, right? But like maybe it's bad for sentiment. It's not gonna be a Luna situation because like CRV, like Michael gets liquidated, right? It's like right? Like it doesn't really affect us. Like with like the whole Luna situation, right? It's like all the VCs and like the funds were like levered to the tits. So like when Luna went to zero, they had to liquidate their entire Bitcoin and Ether position, which like destroyed the entire markets. But in this situation, the only person that's like leveraged CRV is the founder, right? So like maybe Michael's net worth goes down a lot, but that's about it. In the grand scheme of things, right? Maybe sentiment's bad, but like to be honest, like other DeFi protocols, like their token prices have been doing pretty well. Real world assets, right? MakerDAO, they've been doing fine. Uniswap tokens been doing well, maybe because their competitor seems to be going down. So I don't think it's like that big of a deal, to be honest. Also highlight some flaws in AAVE governance. There's a lot of anger towards Michael, but the system allowed him to do this. So there maybe things has to be revisited there. So maybe Michael gets liquidated, right? Maybe the overall wealth in the DeFi ecosystem goes down because like as a result, maybe sentiment doesn't recover anytime soon. Maybe there's smart contract risk and whatnot, but like I don't really think it poses a risk, right? Like real world assets are still chugging along, right? Like the make or bull thesis is still intact. There's still innovations happening within like the DeFi space. I don't really think it's a systemic thing. I just think that for some protocols that are affected, it's not going to be good for them, but for everyone else, right? Like if AAVE loses market share, then maybe Maker, Compound, other minor markets can take their place. If Curve loses market share, then other dexes like Uniswap, Maverick Protocol, Ambient, Balancer, they're going to take on more market share, right? Like that's just going to happen, right? I mean, that's kind of how I see this entire event unfolding. So hopefully this kind of gave a good overview of the situation in under half an hour, but that's ultimately how I see the situation going. CRV, not great. AAVE, some headwinds there, but generally, like rest of the markets, like I don't really think it's that big of a deal. Maybe I'm missing some things, but I think risk is contained, and I think that's ultimately, like what's important, right? So thank you guys for watching. See you guys later, and bye-bye.